please take your seat for the start of the next session. We are about to start the next session. Please take your seat.
It's so good to be here, and it's a huge honour to be introducing, at such an exciting time for the Green Party, our very first ever LGA plenary. But I think everyone here in this room would agree that local government is actually the lifeblood, or a bunch of other kind of body part analogies, the backbone, the rest of it, is the lifeblood of all of the political parties that are out there. But I think it's especially important for us in the Green Party. I think our local council is an especially valued part, and we kind of entwine the party nationally. So our MPs have all served as councillors. Our party leader is active on the London Assembly, and both our deputy leaders are serving local councillors. In fact, one of them's here in her capacity as a Wilden, hello Rachel, Wilden District Council. So I reckon we are the part that makes all of the rest happen. So in that spirit, we should all be cherished and we should all be valued. So I'm therefore going to ask you in that spirit to please put your hands together and give a huge welcome to the leader of the Green
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I begin, I just want to note on what Emily just said and reiterate that. I do want to cherish and value every single thing that you do. Most obviously to our Green Party councillors, but also any political party and indeed the independents too. Look, we might not agree on everything. Some of you might not agree on anything. But actually, it's really, really important that we recognise this is about public service and the public good. Because for far too many people, politics is what they'll see happen in just a few hours' time in the Houses of Parliament. It's two people, often screaming at each other, point scoring. Very little seems to actually change. Yes, the jokes are sometimes well written, with some pretty awful comic timing sometimes, but most people agree Prime Minister's questions is not what politics should be. Now, to be fair to Parliament, plenty of important work does go on there at other times. But we also know there are so many places around the country where real work is happening in local communities every single day. Everyone in this room has chosen to work at the touch point where democracy meets the reality of people's lives. Now, sometimes that can be grueling, right? When you get blamed for things you just don't have any control over. When you see the system failing badly, people who need its support. But sometimes, I hope, it can be really rewarding. Watching kids use a library that you've managed to keep open. The look on someone's face when they hear you've found them somewhere for their family that is safe to all live. And you know from moments like these that local government is uniquely placed to make real differences to people's lives. But too often, local government is expected to solve national crises without the powers or resources that you all really need. Today, I want to set out a course to begin to change that. Now, as leader of the Green Party, you'd expect me to want to shout out green achievements. And don't worry, I'm obviously about to. But I also want to be clear, though, and I mean this. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas or hard work. I hear about brilliant work happening all around the country, despite the circumstances I'm going to talk about today. And yes, often they're from the Green Party, but sometimes they're not. And as long as people in communities have a better standard of living, you know what? I'm here to applaud that too. But since you ask, what are Greens doing? Well, in Bristol, we are delivering record numbers of affordable homes. In Mid-Suffolk, the Green Council has prevented hundreds of people from becoming homeless in just a single year. Wealdon, the top council in the country for spending with SMEs. Lancaster, the top district council for its climate credentials. And in Mid-Sussex, Greens are building a groundbreaking new skills and innovation centre. And as I said, it's not all Greens. In Huntingdonshire, the district council is building a record number of social homes and opening new leisure centres instead of closing them, with space for the NHS to work on preventative health in-house. Now you come to mention it, the Greens have been in coalition administration there since 2022, so you know what, I'm going to take that one too. Now, I often hear Rachel, my brilliant deputy leader, talk about her experience co-leading Wealdon Council, how much it's taught her as a politician. Because for every opportunity she has to fix a broken way of doing things or to innovate, to make something better happen for her community, just as often she finds herself banging her head against a brick wall that is national legislation. And everyone in this room will know better than anyone that the biggest barriers facing councils aren't a lack of ideas or commitment, but it's a broken system that you do not have the gift to change. Now, Rachel told me a story when I was preparing to give this speech. It might seem small, but I actually think it says a lot. She told me that in her area, fixing potholes is outsourced to a private company. If that company shows up at a spot in the road where there are 3 or 4 potholes, but only one has been reported, they can only fix that one. And even worse, that company is incentivized to do a bad job. Because if that pothole opens up again, it's them that get paid to come back and fix it. It is absurd. It's a waste of money, and it's a microcosm of a much bigger problem. In the midst of a funding crisis, shocking amounts of public money are being taken out of our communities in the form of private profit. And one of the most sickening examples of this is in social care. In just 3 UK regions, over 3 years, private care providers extracted more than £250 million in profit. That is often going to private equity firms, hedge funds, and offshore billionaire owners. Whilst the soaring costs of paying for that care, it's crushing councils. But outsourcing is just one of the ways our current system puts private profit above delivering public good. Another is the failed developer-led planning system, where affordable housing is treated as negotiable, but developer profits, they're never treated as negotiable, are they? Because councils are facing housing targets set by algorithms that do not correspond to local need. And in many places, even if those targets are hit, the need remains. Because we don't need more luxury developments or investment houses. We need homes people can actually afford to live in. Of course, being annoyed about the property-led developer system gets some applause. Because also, viability assessments. They have put far too much power into the hands of private developers, allowing them to avoid affordable housing commitments. A Green government would put an end to this, bringing real transparency into the process. We would launch a new generation of council house building and end right to buy completely, so councils can rebuild our social housing stock. And we would give councils stronger powers over long-term empty homes, ending the scourge of homes or houses standing empty whilst families are forced to live in appalling temporary accommodation. Our communities simply cannot tolerate a system where the basics of human life and dignity are treated as less important than the profit margins of corporations. That's why in communities across the country, Greens and others are still finding ways to turn this broken system on its head and make local government work for people and not profit. Now take Stroud District Council, where Greens are ending the outsourcing of the local leisure centre. They did it back in 2024. They've broadened what's on offer in terms of classes, including providing prevention-centred activities for older people. And the result? Income levels have ended up higher than expected. And the council is using that extra money to improve the facilities. Even in the most pressured financial circumstances, I'm proud of councils that are using the tools at their disposal to try and keep wealth in their communities instead of it being extracted from them. But local council scope to do all of these things, it's been absolutely squeezed by the brutal austerity inflicted on local government over the last decade and a half. If you take out social care, the amount local authorities spend on each person in their area, it's fallen by nearly 40%. This government's financial settlement, it was just enough to stave off catastrophe, but it was nowhere near enough to repair the deep damage done by all those years of austerity. Councils in England will still be poorer by the end of this parliament than they were back in 2010. Those squeezed budgets, combined with the enormous financial demands of social care and SEND provision, it sent so many of your councils into crisis. We urgently need a new settlement that doesn't just end the crisis facing councils, but gives you the freedom to make the real change you can make when you're working at your best. And that means filling the £3.9 billion gap facing councils. 5-year funding settlements to provide long-term certainty, and grant funding that rises in line with inflation so budgets keep up with all the rising costs. Because councils can't transform places if you're constantly trying to avoid financial collapse. That's just basic. Now look, I've spoken a lot about this, but I also want to be clear, it's not just financial. A new settlement for councils must go beyond funding and put real power back in the hands of your communities. I've always been proud that the Green Party is a proud champion of the principle of subsidiarity, that decisions should be taken at the closest practical level to the people affected. And it's important that councils put that principle into practice. But again, you're limited by the resource and power that councils often have. Often councillors find yourselves tied, your hands are tied, again, by national legislation. We need to hand so much more power to councils and residents to make the decisions that affect your communities. Greater local tax-raising powers, not just for mayors, but for all councils, including tourist taxes, so councils can make sure those coming to visit make a fair contribution to their area. The power to bring in rent controls, to end rip-off rents. That's right, we need to stop people's wages disappearing into landlords' pockets and keep that money in the local economy. And we need more support for communities so they can be part of budgeting, service design and delivery, and neighbourhood planning. Now look, this can all sound like buzzwords, I get that. But the impact of bringing people into decision-making, that is very real. I was so proud this weekend to march with my boyfriend Richie at Pride in London. And thank you. It was a beautiful day celebrating the LGBTIQA community. And when I got home, I was full of pride and celebration. And then I looked online. And I'm rarely shocked by comments online, but from Tommy Robinson to other online trolls, it's becoming really clear our country, in many aspects, is actually taking backward steps. Hatred is becoming normalized. Division is growing deeper. And other than the grifters who lead these movements, or champion this hate, or call unnecessary by-elections, sorry, that was a late addition. That was aimed at the leader, not any councillors in the room. I don't believe that those people represent the British people and the people you are elected to represent. But I do believe that people feel like politics is being done to them rather than with them. And actually, councils play a huge, crucial part in reactivating your communities, in giving people power and a say in what happens in your local areas. I don't believe that single-handedly will solve homophobia, racism, or indeed any hate crime. But I do strongly believe that returning power back into people's hands is a huge part of the role we should all be playing as elected public servants. And it's how we rebuild trust again. And while there is plenty central government can and must do to unleash the transformative power of local government, there is a real role for local leadership from your councils too. The government has misguidedly treated reorganisation as a cost efficiency exercise. The question cannot be, how do we make local government cheaper? The question needs to be, what kind of local government do we need for our future and for our children's future? That kind of bold vision is crucial, because on top of all of the issues I have outlined today, councils are facing yet another unprecedented challenge. Last month, I gave a speech at the British Chambers of Commerce. It was focused on reviving our high streets, but I also really focused on the impacts of the climate crisis. There was a line in there about how extreme weather was going to wreak havoc, particularly on our transport infrastructure. Now, sure enough, I actually arrived late for the speech because the tube line I was on was evacuated because of extreme temperatures. It was a bit on the nose. But everyone here will already know climate adaptation is yet another example of councils already responding to those huge challenges that national government has completely failed to prepare for. Providing cool spaces, checking up on vulnerable residents, supporting people to adapt their homes. There is so much more to do, and we can learn so much from other European countries. Take Barcelona, for example. They have repurposed public buildings into permanent cooling shelters. Today, 90% of vulnerable older residents in the city live within a 10-minute walk of a shelter. Now that does take resource. National government must properly fund adaptation. They can't expect councils to absorb ever-growing responsibilities. That is why it is so important, as the LGA has been calling for, that government makes action on climate a statutory duty for local authorities. On the climate crisis, like so many of the issues I've spoken about today, local councils are best placed to understand how to keep your communities safe. You just need to be resourced properly to do it. Before being elected as a politician, I did a short bout of hypnotherapy. Probably no one's heard about that, but I did. I did work in communities, using theatre and drama as a tool to bring people together. I saw daily the difference arts and culture makes. But even more so, I saw the difference when people come together, to work together, to solve problems, to create opportunities. Now, as party leader, I spend a huge amount of my time traveling around the country, seeing the most incredible projects, hearing the most inspiring people, and seeing practical differences that people have made on the ground. So to end where I started, there's a really important place in politics for what's happening in Westminster. But there needs to be as much importance placed on what is happening every single day in all corners of the country, where people dedicated to public service, you are doing your best under what sometimes can seem like impossible circumstances. Whatever party you are from, I want to thank you for the work that you do. Politicians must always trust local people to know their place is best. And I and the Green Party, we will always fight for the resource you need to deliver for the people you serve. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zack. What an amazing speech. It's so early in the morning, so I'm just really impressed. We only have a very short session here, but we have just got time for a few short questions and short answers. I'm going to take a group of questions and then hand them to you, Zack. So can you put your hands up if anyone has a question, please? We have roving mics in the audience. Okay, I can see one at the front here, number 3, please.
Morning. I'm Bridget from North Somerset. My question is, given we all need hope right now, and you're doing a great job on that. Sorry, my phone. My question is, what can we be hopeful for if we're having a new Prime Minister in the coming weeks and months? Like, instead of just being down on everything, where can you see little glimpses of hope in the year ahead? Thank you.
Thank you. We've got number 1 next, please.
Councillor Wendy Maples in Lewis, East Sussex. I'm a triple hatter and I worry a lot about what the impacts of LGR are going to be on our town and parish councils. most of the people here are in either county, unitary, or district councils, but I would like us to spare a thought for towns and parishes that are about to see a huge influx of additional responsibilities, so far without any guidance. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's helpful that you introduced your name and where you're from. It'd be great if you could do that. Number 3, please.
Ashley Baxter from Stephen District Council in Lincolnshire. Local government reorganisation would have been a great time to introduce proportional representation, or at least a fair voting system. I think that ship has sailed, but how do we do PR for local government?
Great, thank you. So we'll take those 3. So a question about what can we be hopeful of? Where's the hope? A question about local government reorganisation and how does that relate to structures like towns and parishes, neighbourhoods? And then a question about what about PR? Where did that go? So
Great,
thank you.
So if I start with you, Bridget, where's the hope? Well, the first thing I'd say is the hope's in this room. It's you guys. Because you can look to Westminster and see people who are MPs or jockeying for cabinet positions or jockeying to be Prime Minister, and that is not a slight at this current situation. That's what governments have done forever. But that clearly carries with it status and power. And actually, people who decide to be councillors, more often than not, from everyone I've met, decide to be councillors because they're annoyed with the state of politics. They start to get involved with a local council campaign, or they go along to the town hall and watch and go, you know what, I could get my voice in there too because I want to represent my local area. And that's genuinely really hopeful. It's a little bit, and I mean this respectfully to everyone in the room, I sound like I'm about to insult everyone, including myself, but we're a little bit odd. Like, not everyone goes, actually, I want to get involved and recognise my power and my power in the community. But that's exactly what democracy is. And it's really hopeful that despite the huge amount of challenges I just named, not least the climate crisis, we're still going, actually, at local level, this is where I can make intervention points to really make things happen. And the climate crisis is actually a really good example of that, because I think if you spoke to most people, they think the climate crisis is something solved at the UN or through the COP process or through international agreements. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a huge part of it. But we know actually a lot of the really important climate action is happening at the most local level. It's for SUDS, for sustainable urban drainage systems. It's saving the local park. It's making sure that homes are insulated properly or people have access to the right information about what to do when their home's overheating or how to shade their house. A lot of that can come from the local council. So it's really hopeful that people are still doing that. The second, and I'm aware you said short answers, so I will get shorter for the others.
No, I said short questions. You're
okay,
doing well. Short answers are good as well, though, obviously.
Great. I think about in February and March the Together Alliance, where people from all parties, from all organisations came together to march through the streets, not just in London, but there's been lots of these satellite hubs too. And I think the fact that often billionaire-owned media tells us that we're all divided or we all hate each other, actually, that's not the experience I have going around the country, and I know as councillors it won't be your experience too. It is true, people often have concerns. It's true, people are often scared or fearful. But actually, when you bring people in together into community spaces, more often than not, human beings recognise other human beings as human. And I'm really hopeful that if we can get back to connection in the real world, and that does require resourcing because it requires community spaces where people can eat together, pray together, or non-faith spaces, or even disagree together, as long as we recreate those spaces, I'm hopeful when people come together, we can work together despite differences. So that's what makes me hopeful. Wendy, where have you gone? There you are. Thank you. Reorganisation. I mean, I could go off on a tirade about how badly it's handled, and I won't because I'm giving a short answer. It's particularly frustrating because we needed reorganisation. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of that principle of subsidiarity I was talking about living in one of the most centralised democracies in Europe and actually giving people power. But the way this has gone on about cannot have a meaningful definition of the word devolution. Some people, particularly in rural communities, I'm aware I'm sat with Emily here, it can be 2 or 3 hours even in a car to get to the place where decisions are made. That physically will make people feel, not just feel, but actually there'll be a democratic deficit, frankly. of how people turn up physically or get involved with the decisions that are being made. That's across unitaries, but also I think your point is really well made, that actually in a perfect system, and I realise the perfect system has sailed away for now, but at some point we need to have another version of this conversation, and maybe, just maybe, a new Prime Minister will do it, is to look actually at parish councils and district councils being a really important part of this picture, where you get a much more hyper-local sense of what's going on in your area. And actually what we shouldn't have done was abolish that. We needed to resource that properly and make sure that they both have meaningful power and a meaningful link to a more regional body. Now, that's not abstract for me. I'm aware in some rooms, saying you're from London, I'm about to lose the whole room. But in London, in the London Assembly, I see exactly how that can work, where you have a regional across London body, where I'm responsible for scrutinising strategy. Then you have the boroughs, where that work is going on. And in some of those boroughs, you have mayors with the direct resources and levers. I'm aware I saw Zoe there in particular. They'll argue they should have more resources and levers. Yes, thank you, and Liam behind you. And of course they should have more resources and levers. But that is an improvement on what's happening in some areas of the country. And so we should not be racing to the bottom. We should be racing to the top. And in this reorganisation, more than anything, local councillors should have been involved more. You understand your communities better than anyone. And we talk so often about co-design and co-production. This was an exact time where those principles should have been in place. How we reorganise to change that and challenge that now, I think is probably a whole other conversation for a plenary. And I know those workshops are happening, but the result we've ended in is far from perfect, if I'm being generous. And then to Andy's question, absolutely, proportional representation is vital. Yes, at Westminster politics, but yes, at local level too. Now, in the last local elections in May, this is not a party political point, but I was looking at who got elected with the smallest mandate. And as it happened, it was a Green councillor in Birmingham. Now, he won that council election fair and square under first past the post. That is totally legitimate, and I'm really proud that he won it. There is clearly a problem, though, in our country if we are seeing more and more people elected with such a small share of the vote, no matter how legitimately. That is even obviously more problematic if we have governments that could be elected on 25% or even less of the vote in future elections. In national politics, we now live in a 5-party system, a 6-party system in Wales and Scotland. And that's happening at local councils too, in fact, arguably even more so. And so we need to deal with the fact that we have this democratic issue. Now, I guess the most political point I'd make, or it's not even political, is just we know Andy Burnham, and I welcome it, has said that he'll bring in proportional representation or have that conversation after the next general election because the current system isn't working. Well, if the current system isn't working, it doesn't make coherent sense to say let's have another election under a current system that isn't working to then change the system. And if you have a moment, as we do, where we have, I would say, a democratic crisis, where more and more people are not voting because they feel like their vote is a wasted vote, or the result that they get is so distanced from what the people in the community actually want, then this is the time to change that voting system. So I would say to Andy Burnham, the climate crisis cannot wait, the inequality crisis cannot wait, the austerity crisis cannot wait. We must change to proportional representation, both at Westminster elections and local elections, not in a few years' time, but right now.
Thank you. I would love for us to have another hour and a half to ask questions, but unfortunately our time is up in this space. But I wanted to thank everyone for their amazing questions, and thanks, Zack, so much. If you would like to stay on, the next session I've been asked to point out is with Luke Rogers, who's founder of the Care Leaders in here. And I've also been asked to remind the Green councillors about their photo call. With that, would you please join me in thanking Zack for his time today?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
and hello. And for those of you leaving, lovely to see you. Please do so quietly. I'm Councillor Hannah Dalton. I'm leader of the LGA Independent Group. And one thing that has been critical for us is having lived experience at the heart of policy. Because when you are creating policy and when you're deciding on policy, you're affecting people. And so it gives me the greatest of pleasures to have Luke Rogers, BEM, from the Care Leaders, speaking to you today. So welcome, Luke.